The California sun beat down on the sprawling luxury mall parking lot, turning every car into a mirror of heat and glare. Victoria Hale stepped out of her bright red Ferrari, heels clicking sharply against the concrete. She was already running behind schedule, her phone buzzing non-stop with reminders, emails, and irritated investors demanding updates. Her chest felt tight with pressure. Another day in the life of a woman who built her empire from nothing but refused to slow down for even a breath. She brushed a strand of blonde hair back and slammed the door shut. She didn't have time for distractions or surprises. But life tends to deliver both at the worst possible moments. And today, destiny arrived in the form of a small, wide-eyed boy. As Victoria clicked her key fob, she noticed him, maybe 12 years old, thin, wearing a worn-out hoodie, standing dangerously close to her Ferrari. His hand hovered inches away from the glossy red hood, his expression filled with pure wonder, like he was looking at something sacred. Victoria's instincts kicked in immediately. Fear of scratches, fingerprints, lawsuits, everything. Her stress erupted before she could stop herself. "Hey, don't touch that," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the noise of the parking lot. The boy jerked back as if struck, his eyes wide, cheeks going pale, body freezing in place like a startled deer caught by headlights. "Sorry, ma'am," he stammered, taking 2 steps back. "I wasn't going to hurt it, I really love cars." His voice cracked in that soft, almost painful way boys' voices do when they're trying not to sound small. But Victoria had already made up her mind. She rolled her eyes, dismissing him as nothing more than an inconvenience. She didn't have the bandwidth for this, not today, not ever. Without another word, she turned toward the mall entrance, her heels clicking with irritation. But as soon as she pressed the button to lock her Ferrari, something felt off. She heard it before she fully understood it: a sputter, a cough, a strange metallic choke. Victoria froze mid-stride and turned slowly. Her Ferrari's engine, which had been purring perfectly minutes before, now shuddered violently before going silent. She blinked, pressed the key again. Nothing. No, she muttered under her breath, her stress spiking like electricity. This car was her pride, her power symbol, her fastest escape from pressure. But right now, it was a giant red problem sitting dead in the middle of a California parking lot. She tried again. Still dead. Heat rushed to her cheeks, anger, embarrassment, disbelief all tangled together. Of all days for her Ferrari to fail, it had to be today, when she was already late, already overwhelmed, already teetering on the edge. "Perfect," she hissed. "Just perfect." She paced around the car, tapping her phone screen, trying to locate roadside assistance, trying to breathe. But everything felt louder: the traffic, the heat, the irritation buzzing under her skin. She was a woman who controlled everything. Except this moment, behind her, the boy lingered awkwardly, clutching the straps of his faded backpack. He watched her struggle, his expression shifting from fear to concern. He didn't dare approach, not after getting yelled at, but he also couldn't tear his eyes away from the Ferrari, now sitting lifeless under the sun. Victoria pretended not to notice him, pretended not to care, but his presence, small and quiet, pressed against her frustration like a reminder of her own impatience. Her phone glitched. The Ferrari stayed dead. Sweat prickled at her forehead. She was stuck with no driver, no assistant, no backup plan. For a long moment, she simply stared at the expensive machine that had failed her. Cars weren't supposed to break. People weren't supposed to touch them. Boys weren't supposed to get close enough to trigger her panic. But reality didn't care about the rules she lived by. And as the sun continued beating down, Victoria felt something she rarely felt: helpless. Something about that vulnerability softened her hardened edges, just a fraction. And in that sliver of softness, she finally glanced toward the boy again. He stood a few feet away, fidgeting, unsure whether he should leave or stay. Victoria looked at him properly for the first time, not as a threat to her precious Ferrari, but as a kid who loved cars, a kid who looked like he didn't get many chances to. His sneakers were worn, his hoodie too big, and there was a sadness in his eyes that didn't belong on someone so young. She opened her mouth to say something, maybe an apology, maybe a brusque dismissal, but her pride held her back. Instead, she turned back to her car, jaw tight. Her life ran on schedules, not emotions, not kindness, especially not today. But as another attempt to start the Ferrari failed, and another wave of frustration rolled through her, she heard a small voice behind her, nervous but brave enough to speak despite everything. "Ma'am, I think I know what's wrong with your car." Victoria froze, hands still on the door. She didn't turn yet. She wasn't ready to deal with him, but destiny, it seemed, was very ready to deal with her. Victoria stood in the heat, her patience thinning with every failed attempt to revive her Ferrari. She tried the key again, then the ignition button, then opened the app on her phone, tapping with growing desperation. Each time, the engine responded with the same miserable cough, like a sick animal begging to be put to rest. Sweat trickled down her neck, her heart pounding with a mix of stress and stubborn pride. She wasn't used to things failing her. Not people, not investments, not machines, especially not a car she treated like royalty. "Come on," she muttered through clenched teeth, but the Ferrari only clicked and fell silent again, its glossy hood mocking her. For the first time in a long time, Victoria felt something unusually heavy. She wasn't in control. Behind her, the boy shifted nervously on his feet, hands inside his hoodie pockets as if he were trying to make himself smaller. After watching her struggle for another minute, he took a single step forward. His voice came out soft, almost shaking. Mum. Victoria didn't turn. At first her irritation still had a grip on her, but the boy mustered his courage. I think I know what's wrong with your car. She stiffened. Slowly, she turned, and her glare landed on him with sharp precision. Kid, she said, exasperation dripping from every word. This is a $300,000 Ferrari. Her tone was meant to scare him away, but instead of running, the boy swallowed hard and stood his ground. Yes, ma'am, he replied softly, nodding. I know. That's why. I learned everything I could about them. His voice cracked again, but this time not from fear, more like a memory trying to break through. Victoria frowned, confused, annoyed, and slightly curious despite herself. The boy lifted his faded backpack and unzipped it carefully. Inside was a small collection of tools, older, scratched, but clean and organized with surprising precision. Little wrenches, screwdrivers, clips, connectors, and even a tiny flashlight. Not the kind of kit a random kid would carry. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Why do you have those? She asked, suspicion mixed with unwilling interest. The boy's fingers shook as he touched one of the tools, like he was gripping something more than metal, something personal. My dad, he whispered, looking down. He was a mechanic. He taught me everything he knew. We used to work on cars together every weekend. He paused, voice tightening. Before he passed away last year. The world seemed to still for a second. Victoria felt something unexpected inside her chest, like a small crack forming in the armor she wore every day. Something about the honesty in his voice, the quiet grief, the resilience, it hit her harder than she wanted to admit. The parking lot noise faded into the background as she studied him more closely. This wasn't some troublemaking kid touching cars for fun. This was a boy carrying the weight of a loss far too heavy for someone his age. She could see it now, his worn clothes, his careful posture, the way he kept his emotions tucked away like fragile glass. She softened, but only slightly. Pride still held on. You really think you can fix this? She asked sharply, trying to keep her tone firm. But the edge was duller now. Less judgment, more curiosity. The boy nodded quickly, though nerves fluttered visibly in his hands. I'm pretty sure, he said. Ferraris sometimes get a loose connector in the ignition system. When the heat is too strong, or if the car was turned off too fast. And yours made the same sound, my dad taught me to recognize. His explanation was simple, technical, but delivered with a confidence that surprised her. For a moment, Victoria didn't know what to say. She had spent years surrounded by engineers, million-dollar labs, and automotive specialists. But none of them ever spoke with the innocent certainty this boy carried. The sun beat down harder, and Victoria felt the weight of time pressing against her schedule. The boy looked at her, not pleading, not pushing, just waiting. Waiting for her to trust him, waiting for someone in the world to give him a chance. And in that moment, she realized something uncomfortable. She had yelled at a child earlier, a grieving child, a gifted one. The guilt stung sharper than she expected. She let out a slow breath, her shoulders easing slightly. Then, without another word, she stepped aside. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a dramatic moment with music swelling in the background. It was quiet, hesitant, and human. She moved away from the driver's side door and nodded toward the hood. The boy's eyes widened, surprise flickering across his face like a spark. For the first time, she wasn't looking at him with anger or annoyance, just permission, maybe even trust. He reached out carefully, respectfully, almost reverently, as if touching something sacred. And in a way, this wasn't just a car to him. It was a puzzle he understood, a world he belonged to, a connection to his father. He wasn't ready to let go of Dot as he approached the Ferrari with his small toolkit in hand. Victoria realized something else. She wasn't just giving him a chance, she was giving herself one too. The boy knelt beside the Ferrari like he'd done it 1,000 times before. His hands moved with quiet confidence, each movement careful, yet sure, as if the car were speaking a language only he understood. Victoria watched him in stunned silence. He checked the battery line first, touching the cable with a gentle familiarity, then moved to the air intake, brushing away dust like it offended him personally. Her designer heels clicked as she shifted uneasily. This was surreal. A wealthy investor, standing helpless while a 12-year-old in a faded hoodie performed diagnostics. Her own technicians would charge hundreds of dollars for. His face was focused, young brow furrowed, lips pressed together as he worked. There was no arrogance, no fear, just concentration. It was the expression of someone who had found the one place in the world where everything made sense. Victoria crossed her arms, partly for comfort, partly to hide the creeping embarrassment. She had judged this boy instantly, harshly, unforgiving, and yet here he was, treating her car, not her money, not her reputation, as something worth his time. He moved to a small connector buried deep under the ignition system, something she didn't even know existed. There it is, he mumbled mostly to himself. He reached into his tool bag, pulled out a tiny wrench and an even tinier clamp, and fixed the loose connection as if it were nothing. His hands didn't shake now, they were steady, purposeful. It dawned on her that she was watching someone who had practiced his craft long before most kids his age learned basic chores. When he finished, he wiped his hands on his jeans, then stepped back with a soft breath of accomplishment. "Try it now," he said, not with pride, but with the quiet confidence of someone who trusted his own skill. Victoria hesitated. She almost didn't want to. Part of her feared the car still wouldn't start. Feared the moment would shatter whatever fragile magic was happening between them. But she slid into the driver's seat, her fingers trembling just slightly, and pressed the ignition. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the Ferrari roared back to life, powerful and flawless, the engine purring with the silky smoothness she knew so well. The sound echoed across the parking lot, a triumphant symphony of mechanical perfection. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. Relief washed through her first. Then, awe. Then, disbelief. She stepped out slowly, eyes fixed on the boy. He stood with his backpack slung over one shoulder, like he was ready to disappear again into the world the moment she finished being amazed. How did you do that?" she whispered. It wasn't the sharp tone she used before. It wasn't the commanding voice she used in boardrooms. It was soft, almost timid, like she was afraid of breaking something sacred. The boy shrugged shyly, his cheeks flushing pink. He looked down at his shoes. "I just understand. Engines, they make sense to me." He hesitated, then added something much quieter. "It's easier than understanding people." Victoria felt the words like a punch she didn't see coming. Something deep inside her stirred, something she hadn't let surface in years. Loneliness, familiar pain, and a sting of guilt so sharp it almost made her wince. She had yelled at him earlier. She had made him feel small, unwanted, like a problem. Yet here he was, helping her without hesitation. A brilliant kid, a kid who carried grief behind those big brown eyes. A kid who stood steady in front of a woman who had built walls taller than skyscrapers. She saw him more clearly now. Not just as a boy with tools, but as a child who had lost too much, too young. Someone who used engines to fill the silence left behind. And suddenly, painfully, she thought of someone else, her younger brother. The memory hit her before she could brace herself. Her brother had been just like this boy, curious, kind, endlessly fascinated with machines. He'd taken apart radios, bikes, even the toaster once, just to see how it works. He used to say with a grin. He had passed away when he was 13. Victoria had buried not just him, but a softer version of herself. One she never allowed back. Her heart twisted. She looked at the boy and saw echoes of someone she once loved dearly. The same spark, the same innocence, the same gift, and the same vulnerability. Her voice softened, the harshness melting away. "Hey," she said gently. The boy looked up, cautious, unsure if she was angry again. "You're incredible," she said, the truth, raw and honest. The hint of a smile tugged at his lips. Small and fragile. He wasn't used to praise. Not real praise. Not from adults. Victoria stepped closer, lowering herself just enough to be at his level. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I shouldn't have yelled at you." He blinked, surprised. "It's okay," he murmured. "People get mad a lot." The simplicity of that sentence broke her. People get mad a lot. What kind of life taught a child that anger was normal? She swallowed the lump in her throat and forced warmth into her voice. "Well, I shouldn't have been one of them." The boy kicked the ground lightly, embarrassed. "I just wanted to look," he whispered. "It's my favorite car. I didn't mean anything bad." She shook her head. "You didn't, and you fixed something even my mechanics couldn't diagnose without a computer." His eyes lit up just slightly. It was like watching the sun break through clouds, small, warm, hopeful. In that moment, Victoria understood something important. This boy didn't need money, pity, or handouts. He needed belief. Someone to tell him he wasn't just a kid with a toolbox. He was gifted, remarkably gifted, and just like that, the cold, hard layers Victoria wore every day began to crack. The boy may have fixed her Ferrari's engine, but he had accidentally jump-started something inside her too. Something human. Something she thought she'd buried forever. The moment Ethan turned to walk away, Victoria felt a sharp tug in her chest, feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "Wait," she called gently. Her voice held none of the sharpness from earlier. Ethan paused, shoulders rising as if expecting another scolding. Instead, she walked toward him slowly, heels clicking softly against the pavement. For a second, she saw what she had missed before. A boy wearing worn-out sneakers, a faded hoodie, and eyes far too old for someone his age. "What's your name?" she asked, lowering herself slightly. "Ethan," he replied hesitantly, as if the name didn't matter to anyone else. Victoria nodded, memorizing it. Somehow, this kid had made her Ferrari run again and made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Humility. She crouched further, so their eyes aligned. "Ethan, you're gifted," she said softly. The boy blinked, looking uncertain. Compliments didn't seem like something he received often. "And I'm sorry for yelling at you," she added, sincerity thick in her voice. Ethan offered a tiny shrug. It's okay. People yell a lot. Those 3 words crushed something inside her. How many adults had dismissed him? How many had seen him the way she first had, just a kid near a fancy car? She gently shook her head. Well, I'm not going to be one of those people anymore. Ethan's lips quirked upward, shy and unsure, but hopeful. Victoria reached into her blazer and pulled out a sleek silver business card, the kind most adults treated like a golden ticket. Ethan stared at it like it didn't belong in his world. This is my company, she explained. Hale Dynamics. We build high-tech automotive systems. Ethan's eyes widened, taking in the embossed logo. And, I want you to come take a tour, she continued. Meet my engineering team. See the labs. Try the simulators. I think you belong somewhere. Your talent can grow. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. For real, he whispered, voice trembling with disbelief. Yes, she said, smiling warmly. For real? He hesitated, glancing at the mall behind him as if expecting someone to tell him it was a joke. My mom works a lot, he admitted. Sometimes she drops me here for hours so she can finish her shift. I just walk around and look at cars. Victoria listened quietly, her heart twisting. She recognized the weight behind his words, responsibility far too heavy for a child. Then she won't mind if you have somewhere safe and productive to be, Victoria replied gently. I'll talk to her myself. No pressure, just an invitation. Ethan touched the card carefully, reverently, like he was afraid it would disappear if he blinked. The Ferrari's engine purred steady and flawless behind them, alive again because of this boy. Ethan stole a glance at the car, then back at her. I didn't mean to scare you, he said shyly. I just love engines. They make sense to me. Victoria felt her throat tighten. Engines make sense, she repeated softly. People don't. Ethan nodded. She understood him more than he realized. For years, she'd built walls around herself. Walls made of success, money, sharp words, and precision. But this boy, with a backpack full of tools and a heart full of quiet brilliance, had cracked a piece of that wall without even trying. A gentle breeze swept through the parking lot as she stood and offered her hand. Ethan hesitated for a second, then slipped his small hand into hers. His palm was rough, not the softness of a child who played all day, but the texture of someone who learned through doing, fixing, building, someone who carried more responsibility than he should. You remind me of someone, Victoria admitted softly. My little brother. He was like you, curious, brilliant, and always taking things apart. Ethan's expression softened. Where is he now? Victoria exhaled slowly. He passed away when he was 15. The boy's eyes dropped. I'm sorry, she nodded. I am too, but meeting you today felt like the universe giving me a second chance to help someone who deserves it. Ethan looked up at her with a fragile kind of hope that made her chest tighten. You really think I'm good? He asked. I think you're exceptional, she answered. And talent like yours needs someone who believes in it. The boy smiled, small, genuine, but brighter than the California sun overhead. Thank you, ma'am, he whispered. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Call me Victoria. He laughed softly. Okay, Victoria. He turned to leave, gripping her business card like a treasure he never expected to own. She watched him walk toward the bus stop where he'd probably wait alone at other. The reality that twisted her heart, as she climbed into her Ferrari, the engine humming perfectly under her touch. Victoria didn't feel triumph, or power, or status feelings she was used to. Instead, she felt something warmer, quieter, more fulfilling. Pride, not in herself, but in a boy who had changed her perspective in a matter of minutes. She pulled the car alongside the curb where Ethan waited. The window lowered. Ethan. His head snapped up. Yeah, this isn't a one-time thing, she said softly. I meant what I said. I'll see you soon. The boy nodded with a smile so bright it made her heart feel strangely full. As she merged into traffic, the mall shrinking behind her, Victoria realized something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Not the kind tied to profit margins, deadlines, or boardrooms, but the kind tied to people, real people. Sometimes, she thought, the smallest hands fix the biggest engines and the hardest hearts. And sometimes, the universe sends you exactly who you need. Disguised as a kid with a backpack and a dream, the day she yelled at a boy for touching her Ferrari became the day she drove toward something better, something human. And without knowing it, Ethan had just started the engine of a future neither of them could yet imagine.